What's up?
And how are you?
Hey man, good to see you. Lake Markham. Is that how you pronounce it? Your last name?
Yeah, Markham.
Cool. Lake Markham. Good to see you, man. What's up? I haven't seen you since I think a party at Uko.
You too. Yeah, it's been a minute. I remember you like screaming off the top of a building. That's the last I think that we came into contact.
I think I just never know if I'm ever going to see you again. Partially because the way that I saw you the first time was just it was just incredible luck. There was like you guys went on like really late at night, your band Pineapple Tours at the end years ago. There was like a double booking, and
Hey,
do you remember that?
I remember. I just forgot that it was the double booking show, but totally remember now. Yeah, and we played late enough at night that everybody was starting to get a little jokes were a little funnier, and
Yeah,
dancing really really hard with you after our set was up.
yeah, to Christoph Waltz, I think.
Right. Yeah, that was the first
Yeah,
those folks too, but that was a fun show. They were awesome. They were so cool.
they were a really cool band. I don't think they exist anymore, do they?
I don't not as far as I know. I think they were a pretty brief run, but man, they were a good time, and they were all good people. I still talk to most of them, I think. So
Does Pineapple Tour still exist? Because I always hear that y'all are about to break up, but then you come back around.
well, so it's always every time they play a show, it's the local meme rock band's last show, but you never know if they get an extra book or an extra booking date and have in their career length because of it.
They take
Uh,
it day by day.
Yeah, they just in the moment, As of now, from what I've heard from Pineapple Tours, their drummer has moved on, their bassist has moved out of Nashville as well.
Oh,
And they're pretty limited in terms of their instrument scope at the moment. But they tell me that there are a couple of tentative plans for the future, but that they're, it's hard to plan with COVID and everything. So,
yeah, right. It's pretty hard to get your live set feeling fresh.
man,
Are Wait, what'd you say?
man plans, God laughs.
Man plans, God laughs. There certainly is a lot out of our control, I'd say. Are you in Nashville right now?
I am in Nashville right now, yeah.
Cool. What's up?
Not much. Are you still in town?
Yeah, I live down kind of near Nolensville, with my family.
Oh, very cool. Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I live in like the Belmont Green Hills area in a pretty dusty old duplex that I found for super cheap on Craigslist. So great location, house is kind of whatever, but it's helping me weather the financial situation a little bit better right now.
That's good.
Uh,
Are you still serving at the tap room on 12th South? Didn't you used to work there?
no, I never worked there. I definitely was in those walls a lot of the time though. No, I'm not. I do bartend right now. Well, I did before COVID, but I was most recently at 21C restaurant downtown, House of Cards before that, Butcher and Bee before that.
Whoa. What? Those are fancy places, I feel like.
Yeah,
I've never been to any of them, but
I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun. But yeah, I think the distance from COVID or that COVID's given me from bartending, I miss doing like philosophy and art stuff a whole lot more than I had time to.
yeah, what's going on? What's going on with art? You making any visual or any audio art right now?
Right now, there are a couple things going on. Pineapple Tours, I've been unearthing some artifacts I think they're leaving behind for me. I recently took a trip to Texas in May. It was in May. It was super socially distanced. So I like slept in my car and everything. It was about a 2 week stretch, but I went around the whole state. But down when I was along the coast, I found this like golden pineapple and like
Whoa.
unearthing it and kind of excavated this waveform, which turned out to be their most recent single, Gold Rush. Uh,
Whoa.
kind of like trying, yeah, I just published that for them on Friday. Um, and so that's been a big project for sure. And then I recently found
Cool.
pastes in a meteorite shell. I found this like cracked iPhone 4S, and so right now I'm trying to bring it back to life so I can tap into the hard drive and see what might be hidden in there for me. So they're giving me all kinds of raw material to turn into fun art projects. And then
Whoa.
yeah, that's been a lot of. They're up to some weird new stuff, and I'm really excited about it. But I'm also working on like photography stuff. Has been fun to get back into, and then just I don't know, reading a lot, man. So pretty chill.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. That sounds like a nice quarantine like structure and schedule. Did you say that there's a Pineapple Tourist song that just came out? Can I find that on like Spotify right now?
Yeah, you can. It's called Gold Rush. It's on Spotify, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, all that good stuff.
Sweet.
Easily accessible. And I'm actually working on finalizing a music video for them. And it's going to be cool. Cowboy Vaporwave is how I classify it. So
Whoa.
it'll be a good time.
How long has that band been around?
From what I tell, it's been around since like 2014. So
Cool.
yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty decent amount of time.
Yeah, pretty fun stretch. I mean, it started as a solo project, and then it was like an internet kind of art project, and turned into a live music thing. But I think focusing right now on bringing it back into just like being on internet born to the internet or music born to the internet, you know,
Yeah,
which is
that's cool.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. What have you been reading?
Right now I've been reading a bunch of Kierkegaard. He's my favorite philosopher. He's like literary theorist, philosopher, theologian, social critic, all kinds of good stuff. But also a lot of Sigmund Freud and Jean-Luc Nancy, who's a French theorist. Uh,
Sure.
just right now I'm like grad school, pretty much. Job market is dismal, so might as well wait it out in an incubator like that, you know.
Whoa. Wait, you're in grad school?
I'm trying to so on the 1st of October, and the goal is to be in a program next fall.
Oh, cool. What are you gonna study?
I don't know, like political philosophy or social theory or something like that. You know, something about all the big questions, but also all the questions that we face every day when we talk about society and politics and structures and
Yeah, right. That makes
where
sense. That's
they're.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
What about what are you doing for work and art and play and everything right now?
Well, it's been pretty weird, like not being able to tour because that's what I like to do the most. I just tour a lot, and so I'm with my family. Uh, so I'm here in the basement right now, and I'm just like trying to work on new music. Just in whatever way feels fresh. Not really like an album, but just like maybe send some stuff back and forth with people, or like work
Yeah.
on something in Logic or on my acoustic guitar. I'm not really sure how I want to put anything out, but I just keep doing it song by song whenever I feel like something's ready. But I'm about to put out a song on Friday, and besides that, like I've just been kind of going through different phases. Like I was painting a lot, and then I was like reading a lot, and then I was running a lot. And I was trying to learn French for uh, like 2 months, but now I'm kind of taking like a month-long break. So I don't know. Just kind of always finding different stuff to do.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like grabbing at things, like grabbing at thin air and hoping that it sticks. I kind of felt the same way, man. Um, so I remember hearing you talk about, I think it was in the video you had with Ethan's room, where you were talking a little bit more in depth about like trying to find new ways to release music or like ways to release it that were more meaningful or like different than before or whatever. And it's interesting because I was talking to a buddy of mine in New York named Ray Brown, Rei Brown, but
Cool.
he kind of had an album all written out, and because of quarantine, like he couldn't finish the production or whatever, or he couldn't like finish the recording, and so he's releasing them in these sparse singles and probably won't release songs that would have been good in an album format. They'll just like never see the light of day.
Huh.
Yeah, and I had like this album that or Pineapple Tours had this album that they're working up already lock, stock, and barrel, so they're probably going to send it to me that way. But I'm wondering if you came to any real like interesting insights for that weird conflict that we're facing.
Yeah, right. I think for one thing that I've been thinking about is it's kind of like a modern approach, but also an old school approach that's happening in some ways right now. Like I listen to a lot of like early 60s, like even like, yeah, like even before the album was like a concept at all. And it's like, in some ways I feel like we're going back to that. So it's not even like in some ways it's not even new. It's just like the way that people in the 50s and early 60s and even before would put out like a single is kind of what people are doing now, you know?
And I had a conversation a lot like that one of my last shifts tending bar, but we had Chuck Berry, or we had a Buddy Holly on, and Chuck came on, and I was like, oh man, this song ripped, got it on a 45. And I was like, it's so weird to see Chuck Berry's progression as a career artist, because you see like these songs that only exist in the recesses of the groove on the 45, and then there are a couple periods where you can tell they're like cobbling together singles to make an album, and then they're like comes the album. But I feel like Chuck Berry, like just the single, okay, here are a bunch of singles, and here's this like coherent piece.
Right.
But I totally agree.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. It's like the way that we create art has always been dependent upon the way people consume it. And I feel like we've kind of not realized that because it's been I
Clear
don't know.
cut. It hasn't been
Yeah,
as or something, and now all of a sudden we see the barriers are so abstract and nebulous, and
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and people are like within I don't know, like I never would have thought when I went to like when I graduated high school, 5 years ago or whatever, that like so much would change so quickly. Like I thought that I understood that what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but that
Yeah.
format of like creating now on top of like touring being gone, and like also like kind of the whole idea of being a rock star is kind of gone too, like in terms of being like Led Zeppelin or whatever. And then on top of that, like now releasing music also, I kind of just am like, well, I think I just need to like start over and figuring out how thinking about how people listen and consume music.
Yeah, totally. And I kind of feel the same way. And I think there's been at least there seems to me to have been a huge shift in the way that people interact in general with media, and especially like media on the internet. And so, like, I don't know, like I always knew about the hypertext where, one piece of media contains text and video and music and photo, whatever. We see them a lot in like internet pastiches and stuff. But the way that at this point, it almost seems that music isn't regarded as music alone anymore, to the extent that it's not like injected into a hypertext or a piece of hypermedia or into a broader online persona. And it's trying to think about how to make a single really stand out when so much of it depends on the content that kind of gives it its context or its lushness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a really good point, man.
I had a buddy, it's the same buddy, Ray, in New York, and he released a song called Bubble. I think it was in July. But he said, like, great sound, awesome, and it's really, really catchy and nice, kind of nostalgic and melancholy. But he was really able to win over like the blogs and all that stuff, critics, when he pitched it. And it was more about the pitch for him than the song. Or the pitch is it's a quarantine song about how it feels, and that's kind of what struck them, because it was a very like publishable structure to position the song in, as opposed to like
Whoa.
You know, the song doesn't have to be as catchy anymore as long as the story is or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
so Taylor, like trying to figure out, like not trying to feed into it too much, but trying to glean ideas from that, because if that's the way that it's going, like how do I respond to it?
right.
Uh,
Yeah, totally. And there's like a kind of a catch 22 of like, as an artist, as like a pop artist, meaning pretty much everyone I know, like people making music that's like commercially
if
accessible.
classical, yeah.
Yeah, right. You want to listen to and observe those avenues and the way that people consume music, because you're not making it exclusively for yourself, or you're making it to so that it can collaborate with an
Right.
audience. So you want to follow those rules to some extent, but then also the whole point of creating art is to like have it be this like self-expression, or like this like uniquely create, and part of what is so creative is when you break rules, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, for sure. And so my motherboard just uh, went bad this week. Like a job, they couldn't find any like electrical marks, any signs of corrosion, anything, and just decided to stop working. And so I've been like thinking about ways that I can stay on top of the ball with like production stuff and music stuff with my phone, with like a Tascam field recorder in the meantime. So in a lot of ways, it's almost like limitations. You might see one of these big, you know, big shot musicians, like internet musicians who actually have tons of commercial backing, uh, really nailing it. And you're like, well, I can't do that. I don't have the money for it. But it's almost like there's limitations in the same way with like recordings and stuff, whatever I'll make of them, like give you new ways out. It's like, well, I just can't do anything besides this. And so how do I get creative in this little pocket of what that is?
Yeah, right. And then yeah, I agree, and I think that a lot of times the art that winds up breaking through feels relatable, and it feels relatable because anyone can create it. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like those restrictions too just wind up making other people feel like, oh, like I can have make music on my phone or like on a field recorder.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, but that's something I've been thinking about a lot, because when I first got in, 2014 was when Pineapple Tours came out, and Vaporwave was like starting to die off then, but I think that was like the height of the internet, you know? And back then it was so much easier for like a persona to sort of hide behind cool aesthetics. And now it seems like things have to be this character that's picked all the time, especially since we've been like quarantined for 8 months or however long it's been, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's like, well, what is media that sticks now, or what is content that sticks? It's clearly not just the cool aesthetic. It seems like as I'm scrolling through Instagram, even not thinking about creating things, it feels like I'm constantly being bombarded with like caricature. And so I don't know.
That's a good point. It almost feels like another way that it's like going back to an older time is like through like sensationalism. Like I do kind of feel like where people are just becoming more like characters again. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, it almost feels like vaudeville or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's interesting.
yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, man. I think about that too. I do. I had not thought about the fact that maybe it would be harder to hide behind just like an aesthetic. But when you think about like algorithms, I'm always thinking about a song is almost like it's almost like the like a YouTube ad that like you can press skip ad after 5 seconds. So they're like trying to catch your attention so that you'll
Yeah,
like not press that button. It's almost like if I get put on a playlist, I need to make sure that the first like 10 seconds of my song can like make somebody want to keep listening to it. So there's like I'm really big on like making the intros as short as possible, or at least as interesting as possible.
yeah, that's a good point. Huh. Yeah, because I mean, they are always going to be discovered in playlists, most likely. So that, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, they're pushing us to that. Like I just updated my phone for the first time in a long time and had to get like I guess I had a massive Spotify update that I'd been maybe it was like 10 updates I'd been just like holding off.
Yeah.
And I realized like the app just like now when you click to the most rightmost screen, like where your like mind wants to feel like is the home page
Hmm.
is like your library. I'm gonna go to your library. It begins with playlists, and then I have to move over to go to artists and albums. So they're like pushing me
Yeah.
to use playlists all the time.
All the time. I noticed that too because I only recently made the switch from Apple Music to Spotify. And ironically, the reason was that I wanted more like, I don't know, indie artists and like Discover Weekly and stuff like that. But I was just like so blown away with how much the premium Spotify was really, really relying on that playlist factor. And then like your own like personally saved media was kind of like secondary or an afterthought.
Yeah, right. Which isn't
Yeah.
even what people prefer. Like most of my friends were like, "Oh yeah, that update makes me upset," but you know they're gonna keep using it, and then
Yeah.
you'll
It
go back to doing that.
naturally thrusts all your favorite like consumables into this ecosystem where they all talk to each other. And it's like there's no real way out of that. And to opt out of that is already to opt back into it by Spotify, knowing that you like prefer it this way. It's like, man, like is the only I spent so much money this quarantine on cassette tapes and it ruled. I got this like dual cassette stereo and it's like, man, this is I can do the vinyl thing, but the cassettes, man, they're pretty cheap for what they are and just don't have to. It's almost like that playlist mentality when you collect cassettes too, because they still make new cassettes, but I feel like the vinyl thing is much more mainstream. So when you find cassettes, ultimately you're typically finding them in like I don't know, pawn shops or antique shops or whatever, like the hipster shops. But they typically cultivate thing like old cassettes within a certain framework or like, I don't know, niche. And so you almost do develop the same playlist element when you go in there and like shop from that collection. But
Yeah,
at least I have to like intersperse each song with another song from a different album.
yeah, right. Yeah,
But
that's true. That's cool. I've also started collecting some cassette tapes here and there. It is kind of a cool. I also just got a bunch of records. My friend just gave me like his record collection, but I'm literally right before this. I was trying to get my record player to work, and it just like I can't. I'm like worried that my record player is like too bad of quality. People say like that might like hurt my records, and I always just wind up like overthinking the whole process to where I can barely even want to play a record because I'm like, am I ruining everything?
yeah, am I ruining the machine or am I ruining the record or is like my amplifier gonna get shot after this? I totally feel ya.
Yeah, right.
I had a record player that old Belmont professor of mine let me borrow, and the motor just went bad. And she and I like opened it up and tried to. It was like a audiophile phonograph, and I don't like that. If somebody didn't let me borrow it, I wouldn't buy one. I don't know if I care that much. But anyway, so the motor just went bad one night. The belt wasn't spinning. We take it apart, take out the motor, replace a bunch of stuff, and it didn't work. And then she was like, "Well, I'll get this fixed. You should borrow this one instead." And it was just another really nice phonograph. And so every time I use it, I'm like, "Oh, like, uh, cool. It almost works. Whatever."
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's funny. Yeah, it really is kind of it's like a tedious process. I think I broke my needles, so now I can't even use it. But and then furthermore, when I do listen to music, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like I almost feel like I should look at playlists and stuff because like again, I don't know how good it is for me. I can't figure out my relationship with going against the grain of art consumption because I do listen to a lot of music that nobody else cares about, like none of my friends, and like I think that's what makes me me, and that's what makes my art creative. But then at the same time, the way I consume art, I feel like I should like use a service that's similar to other people so that I can in turn make art that is consumed
Yeah,
in
like
a
a point,
way.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot too because I'll go from listening to like super hard stuff to like I don't know, George Jones, and it's like, well, how do I really bring those into unison with one another? Seems like it might to be to have an algorithm sort it all out for me where the connections are there and I can be like, oh, so this is kind of like that one thing that I saw in my homies like feed. We can
Right.
make it out from there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Yeah, it like there's like this like part of me that thinks that I should be like purer about the way more pure, like about the way that I create and consume, that it should just be this thing that's like not affected by, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think that we are all agreeing to these like social like compromises that
yeah.
like make it where we can make art that is consumable. And whenever we like try to be act like we're above that, I feel like normally people are not being honest.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I do agree with you that there does seem to be this like tacitly hand wringing thing that we have whenever we like just cave to Spotify. We're just sort of like, oh, it'll be fine, Um, and I also think when you talk about creating and consuming, there's like no real distinction between them anymore. So whenever we consume, that generates algorithmic data. And so we also create this online identity of ourselves or this online persona that's taken back up in the algorithms. But that when somebody clicks on our feed, that's almost a creation in its own way. So by cultivating the media that we like in its consumption, we almost generate, a tertiary identity. It's like, oh, but here's also this content for you to consume that I created, maybe unwillingly, maybe I'm aware of it and I'm doing it like in a methodical way. But that's something I think
Yeah.
too, just like how the data can be used as a creation platform.
Whoa. Yeah. Right. That's a really good point. And you're not even like, you're talking beyond this, but even that does make me think of like the fact that it is everybody can make collaborative and make playlists, and then people follow each other's playlists. But then we're also pulling from algorithmic playlists, and that's where we get the music we consume.
Yes, it's like this inescapable web, and the more you think you can get out of it, the more you're just leaning into it. So you might as well,
Yeah, Anthony Fantano. I don't know how much you keep up with him, but he said,
He follows
wait, he does what?
he follows Bald Internet Man on Twitter.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't know why he like never responds to me, but yeah. But anyway, what are you gonna say?
That is the sickest thing I've ever heard. I was gonna say that. Oh, he. I once watched him do like a piece on playlists, and he said that he thought it was. He was like, as much as you can, listen to playlists that are not algorithmic, because you don't know what the algorithm is. And he was like, the algorithm could just be pushing like a corporate like label agenda onto you. But if you listen to curated playlists, you're going to at least a little bit more know that there's like hopefully an honest person just like putting music they've listened to, which would hopefully at least a little bit. I mean, I don't know where those people are getting their music, but help you escape some of that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what like I think that's one thing that scares me is once there's an algorithm, you don't know what that it is, and you don't know where the music's coming from, then there can just be like ingredients, just a dash of Atlantic Records, you know.
Yeah, and then the other thing too that would bother me about that approach is that once you listen to the curated playlist, that just becomes a part of your algorithmic playlist. So it'll remember that you listen to that curated playlist and try and plug more of that in for you or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
yeah, so I kind of just try not to think too hard about like beating the algorithm. Just take it at face value because that's the way it is. But like, how can I use the tools against it or work within it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah,
not very good at it out. It's tricky.
it
I
is
don't have,
tricky.
you know.
Yeah. Is it I have a question for you. It's a little bit of a different subject, but when it comes to creating music, um, do you mainly use like a DAW in your room, like on a computer?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've done a couple different I've taken a couple different approaches to it. Definitely with the first Pineapple Tour stuff, I was doing drum loops and acoustic guitar loops, and then I would just kind of flesh it out, usually via MIDI and like some DI stuff and like maybe an electric guitar with an amp. But I think with the second big Pineapple Tours release, 1-800 PA Tours, um, I discovered that one in a secondhand desk that I got from Goodwill on a USB drive. But it sounds like their approach for it was they kind of just wanted it to sound like really weird arrangements, extra lo-fi. And so some of it was recorded through MacBook MacBook microphone into QuickTime, and then like the rest was recorded around that, or else it was done in their car through an iPhone as a voice memo.
Whoa.
Then later in a DAW. This time around, though, it seems like they're doing it a little bit more professionally. I know they told me that there was a song where they sampled an Encarta 95 Windows CD-ROM, and
Whoa.
file on that, it sounded pretty percussive, and just built a song around it. So it's still sounds like it's in the room. It's decidedly lo-fi, but I think they're going for a different approach this time around, and that's one thing they've tried to do since the beginning, like hopefully make you think about the recording of the song as much as the song itself, so you're not just passively listening to it, you know.
Yeah, right. Are you a big David Byrne fan?
You know, I kind of dig him. I don't know as much about him as I should, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called How Stuff Works. Or wait, what is it? How Music Works? that
Maybe.
David Byrne, that is right. Is that the guy from Talking Heads?
I think that sounds right.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. I got scared that I said David Lynch the first time.
Figure out which one you were talking about for a second either.
That's funny. Why would why would their names do that to us?
I don't know, but I always do. Whenever I see one or the other, I really associate it with the other person. You know what I mean?
They're both like slender white dudes who like have like kind of genius like white hair that they kind of seem like they're like innovators.
Yeah, exactly. But how music works, they do.
How music works. He just talks a lot about ideas on like what a recording is and like how recording over time has become like its own art piece, and there's just a lot of really interesting ideas on that in that book.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. I'll add it to my book queue or whatever.
Do you use the Libby app?
What's it called?
Libby, Libby.
No. Should
Dude,
I?
Yes, it's the public library app, and you can like download audiobooks and ebooks on there for free, or like rent them for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty rad.
Yeah, I just discovered it. It's like been the coolest thing over the last month of quarantine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I guess I do feel like I've seen Libby before, but I've definitely never like used it or clicked through it.
Yeah.
In college, I was using this website called arg.fail. It was just like AAAARG.fail. It was pretty cool. It got shut down for pirating a bunch of like media criticism and stuff. Check music works.
Yeah, I used to use Pirate Bay all through back when I was trying to, when I had like an iPod, or I was like trying to own MP3s. I used Pirate Bay for years,
Yeah, that's another thing. It's just like media ownership is out the window now, because I don't really own anything unless it's like an vinyl record, and so I don't download much anymore.
Yeah, like you don't need to like digitally own something. You want to like physically own it or just stream it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. I have a question for you. Did when I was at that party at UCO, somebody told me that you are like a viral sensation. Do you know what they're talking about?
Yeah, once upon a time. I don't know if you're familiar with Filthy Frank. Joji?
No.
Okay, so he's a big like Billboard topping musician now, but he before that he made like these super weird viral videos on YouTube with like millions of views each, and so I was like a cult character on them, and yeah, so I had like a small cult following, very niche. But yeah, this is back in, I'm thinking 2012 through 2016, 17 was the last one we released. But yeah, it was this character called Dave. I couldn't speak. I just yelped and like spit chocolate in my underwear. Um, we were in college, you know, it was a goof. But yeah, so I got a small following from that and just kind of tried to keep cultivating it. But
Whoa.
Ball Man, the video series we've been working on with the Uko fellas since I don't know, 2018 or 19 is sort of loosely based on that, like in an alternate universe.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it was a good time. But yeah, that's where the Bald Internet Man Twitter came from and everything.
Right.
But you know, as memes become less of a thing and sort of fade into the past, I feel like all that stuff goes away. So it's been another reason that I've been like trying to figure out my approach to internet media and stuff. It's like, well, how do I keep alive and, you know, keep the stuff that I'm putting out like out there?
Yeah, right. I have a friend named Dalton Ross, and he
Yeah,
you
guy.
know wait, you know Dalton?
Know of him through like, do you know Sean Sheets?
No.
No, I know of Sean Sheets, but like, he talks about it a lot where he's like, women's good. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We just grew up going to the same church like when we were kids. And yeah, he like he makes really funny stuff on Instagram and like YouTube, but he doesn't really like care to think much about how his art like he just makes it for himself. Like he's not like trying to go like sell merch or like market his content. It's just like he just makes funny stuff. But that lemons video went totally viral where he just says when life hands you lemons. It's like a vine, and he like just had so much success from like we'll be out hanging out and people would just be like, "Oh, are you that lemons guy?" Just everywhere. Crazy.
That is really cool. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely kind of my approach with it too, is it's like to some degree I want the stuff that I make for myself to like matter, but I love making it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's the same ordeal where it's like, yeah, this is what I do, you know.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I think if anything, he was like a little bit perturbed by it because like he made a really hilarious collage of things girls had said to him on Tinder about the video that he
yeah.
posted on his Instagram. You can see that it's just like so encapsulates like how he actually just was kind of bothered by the just meaninglessness of it.
And there's definitely that little bit of frustration too, because definitely still reach out to me all the time about it and ask, you know, this or that. Like, yeah, man, like I dig that you're like following me, but like I'm doing other stuff. That was just this one thing I did, you know. So it's
Yeah.
like, listen to Pineapple Tours though, if you want, that'd be dope. I'm working
Yeah,
real hard uncovering their stuff that they passed down to me secretly. So, um,
totally. I have a yeah, I have a friend who probably the most viral friend I've ever had. Like he like started an Instagram account that got really popular. I would tell you the name of it, but what I'm about to share, I'm afraid he might not want it to be associated with. But he just last time I talked to him, and I haven't got to talk too much about it since. He said virality is the worst thing that can happen to you, and he's like a pretty positive dude. He didn't seem like destroyed by it, but I couldn't help but like keep thinking about that because I feel like that's everyone's dream is virality, but maybe there's something to like how it makes you it doesn't like the people that it attracts or like the way the narrative it creates like doesn't allow for like complexity or for people to like really be able to follow you long term and engage with your new creative endeavors or something.
yeah, I've thought a lot about that before too, just like reading net theory books and stuff, where it's like virality really does seem like a. Here's this quote that I've been thinking about a lot lately from this philosopher I like called Theodore Adorno. He was writing like right around the post World War II era, but he has said reality becomes its own ideology through its faithful duplication. And so it's like, when the idea doesn't have anything that like stands against it, when I think of virality, I just think about the explosion of the single unit, you know, with no feedback or no, like, I don't know, not being in conversation with any other content. It's just, it explodes for its own sake. Then yeah, it does really seem like it's difficult to have any sort of undercurrent that comes along with that besides just the image itself, or the video as the image itself. So yeah, it's like, yeah, I guess in a certain sort of way, like, you become the Lemons guy and that's it. Everything else you do after that, it's like, oh, this is something the Lemons guy does, or this media is like not Lemons media, but it's still funny. But it's funny because it's not a Lemon media, you know, the Lemon media.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense. It does it, and also just like destroys any like, it kind of it could like, or erupt like a volcano, everything that was happening on your like social media. Anyone who felt like they were like a part of like a small group of people that followed you, maybe they can even their relationship with you is disrupted. Every comment stream everywhere online, it's just like literally robots commenting like, I vote for Trump or something, you know, and it's just like you're gone. Your community is destroyed.
I did a Pineapple Tour session with Amplify. Remember Amplify here in town back when they were? Yeah, it was the Snow Day session where we played King Trash, and like the
I remember
comments
that.
riddled with like, yeah, fans who were asking about this one thing. But it is crazy. It's weird how the internet works, and I mean, I think a lot of ancient problems that have just sort of taken on new form and like can expand much further because we've got the weird internet thing. But I don't know, man. Strange out there. That's why I moved to Texas. It's just the desert. It's like the emptiness of the human psyche.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dude. Every time I tour in Texas, it's like I always try to book like 5 or 6 cities, and by the time I come out and merge in like Louisiana or Oklahoma or something, I'm like, wow, I feel like it's been like 3 weeks. I can't explain it. It's just different.
You come out as a different person, man, and it's funny because your sight tries to even your sight, just your vision tries to extend beyond objects into like the unreflective horizon. And it's like, no, there are like things here and I've got to think about them, and like I've got to like reflect on myself as being in the world more than I do in the desert, where it's just like endless, historyless, just, it's weird.
Yeah, right. So you're wanting to move to Texas, you say?
I did move there for about a year in 2017, and then
That's right. Oh, that's right. I remember that. What city were you in?
I was in I was in a lot. I was in like Austin. I was in Fort Worth for about 2 weeks living in my car, and then I slummed it for a while out west in Alpine. But yeah, so I got to see like central, northeast, southwest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Austin is like, I genuinely think Austin is one of the coolest cities. I really, really like Austin. Do you dig it? What'd you
Yeah.
say?
I said it's so much fun. There's not another city like it for real.
Yeah, it's like Nashville, but bigger and cooler. Like I love Nashville, but I think it's like a trendier city and cooler, you know?
I think Austin like parties a little harder and talks a little dirtier too. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of like that gritty element of it.
Yeah, that's totally true. I would back that for sure.
Has more tats.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've only been a couple times through music, and one of them was South by Southwest, where we just played a bunch of unofficial shows that I tried to book, and it was just insanity.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. When you were down there and you were like writing a lot of stuff and publishing a lot of like literature, I felt like, or like at least like Facebook posts that were like incredibly well written.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I was definitely, and that's another thing I kind of regret is the older I get or the more I get from like those really challenging sorts of like experiences in life where I get older and I don't want to put myself through that as much anymore. But like I also kind of lose that ability to throw myself into maybe not ideal situations just so I can create that kind of like literature and like philosophize or whatever. Because that was like a really dark time in my life, but I feel like I produced so much, I don't know, literary content out of it that I want to write a book, but at this point I'm so distant almost from those emotions that I don't know how to cobble it all together. But when I look back, that was definitely a transformative process on me in terms of like writing. I think something to do with like the loneliness and isolation again of like the desert and being out where no scenery talks back to you because everything's flat, as well as just I don't know, a pretty transformative time. I had like left a finance job to wash dishes in the middle of nowhere, because I just wanted something different. So
Wow.
yeah, it was awesome, and I definitely like landed on my face, but it was hugely formative. So yeah, good time for writing.
Yeah, that's cool. I've only done one like tour that I tried to do totally solo, and
Hmm.
I was well for the greater context. I was doing this thing in 2018 where I was trying to play 100 shows in 100 days,
I
and
really remember that.
yeah, cool. Well, the first like 35 were with a full band, and then me and one friend went on a road trip playing like open mics and stuff. And so I basically only booked like 40 shows of the whole tour. And then it like was just going to be me going to new cities and playing open mics, trying to meet people. And so
Hmm.
me and my friend went to the West Coast. We came back. I was at about 60. And then I went up, then they had to go back to work. So it was just me in my minivan. And I drove up to Ohio and started playing in these tiny, just like literally just nowhere towns that no one's ever heard of that would have these like tiny open mics at a coffee shop. And after like 4 days, I developed more like anxiety than I thought I would ever have to deal with in my whole life. Like I was like, oh, it's cool. I'll be like meeting people at these events, and it pretty quickly being on my own, all of a sudden, like my brain had created this crazy echo chamber. I needed like at least one friend. Like I was totally lost. And I actually wound up dropping it at 65, 66 shows and came home.
Really?
Yeah, I like could only do that for like a week. I was like, it was really, really hard for me. And I didn't think it would be at all.
Yeah, you don't think so because there's something so romantic about like how liberating it is. But I kind of when I went to Texas, um, I hit Austin. I saw my friends in socially distanced scenarios and everything, and then from there, and I really went through the middle of the state, all the way south, and came up along the southwest border, all the way through the through the northern part. I didn't go up into the like the Amarillo area or anything like that. I just kind of cut straight back across to Nashville. But I did most of the state, and that's where I spent most of my time, and that was all alone. And you are completely right, man. It's like I think for me there was this realization of like death, and I could die right here, especially going like 90 miles an hour, 2 feet over, the pavement in this metal box. And you get out there to West Texas and you're flying, but also like if I died, like who would really know about it until I came up missing, and alone this anxiety of like rootlessness of traveling, of I need to get here, but maybe I won't get here, maybe I'll go somewhere else. And it always felt like this scribbling on my brain, just like this terrible scribbling. And it's like, yeah, it really does do something to you. It's like changes you.
Yeah, which is weird because I think of myself as being kind of isolated. Like I don't get like I'm a lot of times turning down or not actively making opportunities like be social. But I live here
Hmm.
with my family and I do interact with them a lot. But I kind of see it as like passive interaction. I'm like, well, I'm not really intentionally seeing anyone today. But then I guess I must just like it's like added sugar or something. It's like I'm actually consuming way more than I really think I am at being way more social than I thought. And when I actually was out there all alone, and I also lost my security of home, it just was way too much.
the security of home thing is like, yeah, ridiculous how much that makes. You're right. It is all kind of like added sugar that you have this weird withdrawal from once you're out there. I never thought about it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I think about that because I think about trying to think about added sugar a lot lately, and I'm just like because during quarantine when you're only home, I don't know, at least I'm a little bit more conscious of what I'm consuming. Not that I'm super healthy, but I'm just like I'm really beginning to realize some patterns that I have, you know.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, I guess I haven't fully asked you, what have you been besides your road trip? What does quarantine look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much I took the Pineapple Tours record from being like 25% done to what I would say is like 80 at this point, which has been really cool.
They rely a lot on you as a producer, I suppose.
They do. Well, what they'll typically do is they'll drop patterns or signals or messages, and so I have to put them all together, typically in very digital processes. There's a lot of encryption that goes on. I have to interpret things, and anyway, so yeah, I'm doing a lot of that for them, as well as stitching together the parts. And then, yeah, I've read a bunch of books, kind of picked up where I left off when I left Texas, because really my life kind of fell apart for a few years. I didn't read as much philosophy or literature as I wanted to. So I've been like getting right back into that. And then, yeah, the road trip was pretty huge. I was doing a lot more photography and like video stuff at the beginning, but I think now I'm so focused on the Pineapple Tours that's really occupied the majority of the creative part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been awesome. I might never get paid to work on art ever again. So that was kind of a great way to spend the summer.
Oh, you mean like unemployment?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is sick, dude. That's really cool.
Yeah. So it sucks because the unemployment like gave me just a little, pretty much a perfect replacement of what I was making before. And now I'm making like less than half of my income before quarantine. And so times are getting tough. But
Yeah, right.
I am glad that we had the summer to be productive in, and hopefully, most people got taken care of. But
Yeah, I don't mean to be dark about it, but lately I've been thinking it's going to be a hard winter, Like it really is going to be hard.
and I know Tennessee is supposed to roll out enhanced unemployment benefits again next week. They opted in for it on a state by state basis. That's at least my understanding. And so really hoping that comes through for us. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky fall, tricky winter, like with or without that. It's just there have been many displays of utter disregard for human life in the past 6 to 8 months, and how do you come back from that?
Yeah, do you keep up with politics a lot? Like, I mean, I understand it also is like when it's personal, you have to, but like, is that something you choose to engage with?
Yeah, I typically like to. I think it's really important. Yeah, it's something I like to keep in the know on. I mean, in college, I studied a lot of like political theory, political economy, and cultural thought, that kind of thing. Then I think when I was in Texas and homeless for a little while, it kind of like a passive, visceral role for me. And so I like to just keep in touch with it, not only because I think it's interesting as a philosophical discipline, but also like, it affects my life as well as like the lives of others who are, who need looking out for as much as anybody else. And yeah, so in that regard, I almost feel like it's definitely my responsibility, and it's my responsibility to vote and to, spread the word to the neighbor and that sort of thing.
Yeah, right. How do you feel like do you found good channels to like consume politics that isn't just like totally corporate? Like, have you found like a lot of like, is it like through YouTube and podcasts and stuff?
It's tricky. It really is, especially as like politics become more like trendy or whatever.
Right. Oh, I
Luckily,
didn't think about that.
yeah, it's really out there. But Instagram remains, I think, my favorite source, like smaller, more independent things like that, because you can still have, whereas on Twitter, you know, it seems to be like these huge echo chambers. And I've been like reading this sociologist about the construction of truths on Twitter and the way that rhetoric occurs on Twitter a little bit more differently than it does on Facebook or Instagram, for instance. It's just a little bit more conducive to that, or to like the amplifying effect of one point of view. But on Instagram, I really do feel like I'm surrounded by personal resources, acquaintances, friends, whatever, who do a lot of like organizing in the socialist sense, and who do plug me in to these resources that are very valuable, independent, might be big, but still independent, you know, or else, or just really helpful for like, you know, artists that are really tapped into the political realm. All of which I think are necessary. You know, we do have to think about the role art plays in a political future. And so that's honestly Instagram, and like just clicking through stories that seem to teach something I don't know about. Just taking the time out of my day every week, you know, to educate and stay on top of it. It seems like the very least I can do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about. I mean, I see a lot of people like reposting political or just like social ideas, like that are kind of like these like they'll be like graphic design, like click through, informative like pieces, is stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and it's scary because of, like I said, how trendy that's even become as this sort of medium.
Yeah, it has definitely.
Definitely, I wouldn't say I've like turned a skeptical eye toward that or anything, but I'm on the lookout for different things that aren't quite so like eye-catching. Like I follow this Dank Lloyd Wright is the name of the Instagram page. Like, do you follow them?
No, but that sounds
Like,
cool.
like I don't know, leftist architecture memes, and like it includes theory with the meme, you know, but it's just a really cool like alternative way to get a different outlook, you know, and stuff like that. I think is really valuable, if not more valuable, because it kind of forces you to put the ideas in a conversation with your own perspective, as opposed to having this whole perspective that you kind of have to like connect the dots between, you know, practice and theory. And I think both are really. Uh,
Yeah, right. I'm curious what you think about like your artistry in correlation with like your near to distant future. Do you ever like think far ahead, or do you just take it day by day? Do you think about how we as artists are going to be able to like create art in the future, and do you personally like feel like you can or want to like adapt to that, or like what that will look like?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it. I definitely feel a little bit like discouraged for sure. Um, to the extent that it'll like be a viable income source at least. Um, and that, not to say that's like the purpose of art, but you know, it is nice if you can see a little bit of, you know, I don't have to work 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week. Maybe I have to work 35 hours a week because I'm paying for a little bit of it with this thing that I love to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, to that extent, it's cool. I mean, the financial thing about art is cool, but
totally.
I don't really see that being a viable long-term plan for myself. Like alt and off in the fringes, I think. So like I'd always continue, or I see myself always continuing to make stuff, but I've got to reevaluate like how I do it, I guess. I don't know, man. These are all, along with the media and like how to adapt to content driven music release, you know, I'm thinking about these issues as well. Like
Yeah,
I am kind of just winging it day to day right now, for sure.
totally. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's in some ways that, like I said, like seems to be the healthiest, and also just like in other ways, it's just I don't know. When I would, I think it's kind of just taken the future's just been knocked out of me, like, because I would try to come up with a future, and then as COVID keeps being like lasting longer, after a couple, like, think I've had like 3 tours get canceled now. So where I'm just like, well, what's the point? Like, it's just better to work really hard on something right now, you know?
Definitely. I kind of feel the same way, where it's like the carpet's out from underneath my feet for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm more adaptable than ever, but I also have less to work with than ever before, you know. So yeah, where do we go from here? I don't know. It's nice to have that wiggle room and just day by day, you know.
Yeah, I definitely see some, like, at least some hope. In like Patreon specifically, like the idea that people could like maybe subscribe to each other, like help chip in $1 or $2 to their friends, and how that could
Mm-hmm.
be a way that artists could, like, especially who have like a more fringe like community or like niche community could like support them by everybody just like chipping in $1 or $2 every month,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I don't know. That seems like a good way to go, but I don't know, I get a little guilty with that kind of thing in the same way that I would to do a Kickstarter or something. I don't know. Not that there's anything
Hmm.
wrong. Just have that weird, like, if I don't know, is this on the community or is this on me? And that might be personal, like, shame thing too, you know, weird. But Patreon's crossed my mind before. I don't know how I feel about
Yeah, the Kickstarter thing is particularly strange because, like, we all personally know people who work a job to like save up to record, and then we also know people who like raise
it.
$10,000 in a week, which is like, on the one hand, I'm like, that's just sick that they did that, and I guess we're all out here like grinding, so it's cool that they were able to like
Mm-hmm.
turn to their community. But I've done a GoFundMe before, I've done a Kickstarter before, and every time I've felt a little bit weird about it. But it's hard for me to know if I'm feeling weird for like, for what reason am I feeling weird, and is that something that, like, as an artist I need to overcome, or is it like something that I should like wrestle with, you know?
Exactly. I feel the same way about it. So I don't know. And the Patreon kind of makes me feel the same way. Unless I do know this one, I do subscribe to this one guy called the Lit Crit guy on Twitter, and he does like literary criticism as a podcast or two, whatever. But he's got a Patreon, but he like hustles and he produces all this crazy content, you know, and like reading a new book every 12 hours pretty much. And so in that sort of case, it's like I respect that. But for something that's a little bit more of a slow burn, like music, you know, where you gotta like spend time creating and cultivating this, I do wonder, you know, payoff versus income.
Yeah, right. And we've talked a lot about the difference in how people consume and how maybe you adapt to that, but there is something to be said about like artists for our whole lives, and for like a few decades before us, bands would take 2 to 3 years, or at least 8 seasons of a year, maybe in the 60s with a little bit faster turnaround, to make art. But there was definitely periods where they were allowed to like live within the art and weren't expected to be touring, promoting anything.
Right.
Now, if we're going to use Patreon, we're and like be like, oh, a song should come out every month, this and that. Like, you that also changes the way we create, which seems obvious or inherent, but when you really do think about, like, oh, now I can't do some sort of thing where I like take a 6 week break from Instagram because I'm a business, and it's then you can't even have those breaks, or like even maybe do as many road trips like you just did, you know?
Exactly. Hold on, I'm gonna close this door.
You're good.
Um, yeah, no, I totally feel that, man. Where it's like, yeah, that whole Spotify debacle with the CEO coming out and saying all that stuff. It's like, well, yeah, it seems to squeeze out the little people who have to work really hard and hustle at their job to like afford this EP that can come out once every 2 or 3 years. You know,
Yeah.
like even if you do have the capital for that kind of thing, yeah, just having to babysit and like I don't know, cultivate and curate your presence and personality all the time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I am sort of like discouraged because of that as well. It's just, well, how do I really keep hustling as a truly independent, self-funded? I'm bummed out. It's just a question that, you always have to be conscientious of.
Yeah, right. It can be discouraging, and hopefully there's encouragement though in the fact that like if you're feeling that, like surely everybody is, and if everybody is, then maybe we're going to like want to start consuming art that also could be even more DIY if everybody is making it. And I mean, the language could maybe change.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'll tell you, one of my buds, Logan Riffenberg, he was in Christoph Waltz. You familiar? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were at a show at the end about a year ago, and he was like, can you imagine how great of a venue the end would be if every DIY musician in Nashville just like crowdfunded it? And it's like, man, that would be our space. That would be so tight.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Right.
And it's just like weird revolutionary ideas like that where, yeah, like surely we all kind of have to have this discouragement or like this weird cynical way of looking at the industry. So like, why don't we just like talk to each other about that and figure out these cool ways we can create a community and organize? And
Yeah. Right.
or it's just hard to figure out what that looks like until we have the conversations.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. That's so true. That's good, man. That's cool. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it, man. I guess should we cut the tape? I feel like this is a good place to stop. Unless we got anything.
Point.
Yeah, we can always talk some more next time, man. If you ever
Yeah,
want to come back on a week or two or whenever, maybe the next Pineapple Tour song is out or whatever, we can come talk and spread the word a little bit more.
This was a great talk. I feel it's been a while since we've like actually had a one-on-one.
I know. I'm always and I always love keeping up with you, and I feel like you've got a really fresh perspective. So it's great to get to talk to you a little bit more one-on-one about it all.
Yeah, for sure. Same to you. But have
Absolutely.
a great rest of your day.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day too, man. It's been really cool hanging out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
You too. Peace out.